Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Beginner Breakdown series. Today we are going to be learning all about inversions. So we're going to be talking about how to find inversions, how to form inversions for each one of the chords within any major scale, as well as we're going to be talking about how inversions can open up different voicings for your worship playing, how they also are going to make it easier and more simple for you to play piano by keeping your hands more centrally located and not having to move all over the place on the piano. And then finally, in this lesson, we're also going to talk about how you can use inversions to style up your worship playing even more. So I'm super excited and pumped about this lesson today, and let's jump right into it, and I'll see you guys there. Hi friends, we're jumping right in talking about inversions today. Again, we are going to be working in the key of C. Just for those of you that are starting off, I still want this to be very low enough on the shelf to where you can grab these concepts of forming inversions and how to use them. But for those of you that might be a little bit more farther down on the journey, on your worship piano journey, you can also take these same principles and it can be applied to all 12 of the major scales, all 12 of the key signatures. So we're going to jump right in taking a look at our C major chord. So we already know how to form our C major chord. We know the fingers that we use, which is 1, 3, and 5. We also know that our C major chord is using the notes C, E, and G. So when we're talking about inversions, basically all we're doing is we're taking these same notes and we are inverting them to form different versions of the exact same chord. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to play the C major chord right here in what is known as root position, and this is what you're already familiar with. And all we're going to do is we're going to take finger number 1 here on our C, and we're going to take C, and instead of it being right here, we're actually going to put C on top. And how we're going to do that is we're just going to reorder our fingers. So all we're going to do is take finger number 1, move it up to E, finger number 3 is now going to be on G, and then finger number 5 is now going to be on C. So we're still playing the exact same notes as our C major chord. We are just playing them in a different order. And so this is still a C major chord, and this is known as C major, the first inversion. So we have root position, then if we take C and we just put it on top, reorder our fingers, this is C major and this is the first inversion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the exact same process. So we're now that E is where finger number 1 is. Now we're going to take our E note and we're going to put our E note on top. So again, we're going to reorder our fingers. So we're still playing the exact same notes. We're still playing C, E, and G. We're just playing them in a different order. And this is second inversion. So again, let's go back right here to root position. So we have C major in root position. We put C on top. That's first inversion. And then now we put E on top. That's second inversion. So this is a really great thing to have in your tool belt because this gives you different voicing options, and this also makes it more simple to play the same chord in different octave ranges. So even just taking just this middle area right here of the piano, if I play it in root position, you hear the tonality of what it sounds like in root position. When we go up to first inversion, you know, it sounds a little bit higher because we are moving up the piano towards those higher notes, towards those higher octave registers. And then when we go up to second inversion, the same thing. So this is a little bit more brighter. So just the tonality difference, just playing those different inversions of the same chord, even within this area, just a small area around middle C on the piano, already is opening up a lot of options to you. So let's kind of continue on. I want to go through all the chords in the key of C and kind of walk you through again forming these inversions. It's the exact same principle that we just used and the same technique that we just used on C major. So we're going to go a little faster through the rest of these. But if you need to slow down, if you need to pause the video, feel free to do that. So we're going to go from C major. Our next chord in the scale would be our D minor chord. And again, we're going to do the exact same thing. So we're going to take D, because D is on the bottom, and we're going to put D on top. So that gives us our first inversion, and then we're going to do the same thing. We're going to take F, and we're going to put F on top, and that gives us D minor, our second inversion. Next is E minor. So again, we have the same thing. We're going to take E, we're going to put it on top. That gives us our first inversion, and then now we're going to do the same thing, and we put G on top. That gives us E minor, our second inversion. Next we have F major, and again, we're going to repeat the process. Take F, put it on top. So we have first inversion. Now we're going to take A, put it on top. We have second inversion. Then we go to G major, take the G from the bottom, put G on the top. Now we're going to take B from the bottom and put B on the top, and that gives us our first and our second inversion. Next up the scale, we have our A minor chord, and we're going to take the A and we're going to put it on top. And then now we're going to take the C note and we're going to put that on top. And that gives us our A minor first and second inversion. The next chord is our B diminished chord. And again, we can do the same thing here. We can take our B note that's on the bottom and we put it on the top. And then we take our D note that's on the bottom and we put it on the top. And that gives us our root position, first inversion and second inversion for all of those chords in the scale and in the key signature. So the first thing that I want to talk about with inversions, one of the really great things about inversions right off the bat, number one is it really helps you to transition through chords in a song without having to move all over the piano. So it makes it a lot easier to play chords without jumping all over the place and getting super crazy. It allows you to actually keep your hand position very centrally located, and you can kind of look at it as it's a more efficient way to play, and it maximizes the movements that you're making, which can be really great for a lot of reasons. Number one, as you continue down the worship journey, if you are a worship leader, if you are a singer and you are playing piano and you're also singing, using inversions helps you a lot because you're not having to think about making these huge movements all over the piano. And especially when you're starting off, it's a lot easier to hit wrong notes and make mistakes. Whereas if you get really good at inversions early on in your journey, then it makes those movements not as drastic and it makes it easier to transition from one chord to the other. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get into it and talk about some examples of this. So let's talk about a chord progression first. We're going to take a very simple chord progression. We're going to take a C major, we're going to take F major, A minor, and then we're going to go back to F major. So that's going to be our chord progression. It's going to be C, F, A, back to F. All right, and so for the first example, what I'm going to do is I am going to still use C major in root position. There's a kind of a lot of different ways that we could do this, but we're going to use root position for our C major chord. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to use first inversion for our F major chord. So let's take a look at first inversion again. So if we take root position of F major, again, all we're doing is we're taking our F note and then we're putting it on top. Okay, so that gives us F major in first inversion. So, but we're gonna actually play that down here in this octave range instead of playing it up here. So it's the exact same thing. So if you jump down here, you take F, you put it on top. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go from the C major chord, and then we're going to catch our F major chord right here. Then what that's going to allow us to do is when we go to the A minor chord, A minor is right there, and then just by barely moving our fingers, we're right back to our F major chord. And I am using a different fingering for this inversion of the F major. Instead of using 1, 3, and 5, which is completely fine to do, I like using 1, 2, and 5. That's just from years of playing. This is more comfortable for me, and that's just how I've developed it. And most of the time when I play first inversion on most chords, I use this fingering. Again, I want you to get super caught up with fingering and get bogged down with theory to where it prevents you from learning as easily and as quickly. So I want you to know that this is normally, most of the time, the correct way that most people do it. Most people use 1, 3, and 5 for a lot of things. It is perfectly okay to use 1, 2, and 5 in this situation. So I always encourage my students to explore what is comfortable. So I want you to always kind of be pushing the boundaries there. So back to inversion. So we got our C major, we got our F major, A minor, we're playing in root position, and then we're back to F major in first inversion. So just by using inversions on one chord in our chord progression, what that allows us to do is not have to move our hands very much. So it makes it really easy to go through this chord progression. So we're just giving it a 4 count on each chord change right now. But you see how I'm barely having to move my hand at all. My right hand is staying very central, which makes it really easy. So you have that opposed to where a lot of times, you know, when you start off playing, you're making these big leaps. So that's one of the big things that inversions really open up. And there is countless ways to do this. So, you know, the way that we just did it, I started off on root position on the first chord, but I could very well change that, and I could do, you know, second inversion on the C major chord, and then I could do what we were doing already with inversions on the F. I could still do root position on the A minor, and still do first inversion on the F. So there's a lot of ways that you can use these inversions to make it very simple for your hand positions. Starting off, as you're really getting these inversions underneath your belt, it will take a little bit of thinking and it will take a little bit of time, but really begin to, you know, when you sit down and you look at a chord chart, let's say that you were working on a worship song and the chord progression that we were just doing was the chord progression for the chorus. You know, sit down for a second and take a look at that chord progression and say, okay, how could I utilize inversions here to make it easier on myself and to make it more simple when I'm changing my hand positions between those chords. And you're going to find certain preferences that you like. You might even find certain inversions that you like the voicing of it, of that chord, and you think it sounds better than other voicings. All of these things are a part of the journey in worship piano and kind of discovering what you like and what sounds good to you. So one thing that I also wanted to mention real quick while we're talking about how inversions can make it easier as you walk through a chord progression is we've already talked about suspended 2 chords. And if you missed out on that video, please go back and jump into that one in this beginner breakdown series, because that one is packed full of really good stuff that you're really going to enjoy. But we already know how to do our C suspended 2 chord, our F suspended 2 chord, our G suspended 2 chord in the key of C. I also wanted to point out that with that chord, you can also do inversions as well, and it works the exact same way. So, you know, you could take our C suspended 2 chord and you just put C on top. And the suspended 2 chords, when you begin to invert them, create some really open voicing. So, like for example, you can hear how open it sounds on that C suspended 2 chord. And that also is a great way to do inversions. So one of the first inversions that I learned when I was starting off on piano was the chord progression for I'm Trading My Sorrows. So some of you may know this song, some of you may not. It's been around for a really long time. But I'll show you the inversions using the suspended 2 chords that I learned when I first started off playing piano and playing worship piano. And so it went like this. So those first 2 chords in progression is C suspended 2, and then I'm going to an F suspended 2 chord. but you see I'm using an inversion there. See, normally you're used to seeing it where the C note is on the top, but in this inversion I have the C note on the bottom. So it just allows me to make a very easy change. And then just to kind of highlight some of those other inversions, I use the first inversion here on the A minor chord, and then I used an inversion right here on G major chord. So this is the G major, the first inversion. So basically what we did is we took the G note from the G major chord and we put it on top. And when I put that all together, you have that classic chord progression from I'm Trading My Sorrows. So again, I just wanted you guys to know that you can also use these inversions on any chord that you learn how to form on the piano, especially those suspended 2 chords, because they sound really, really good, and you're going to discover some very open sounds as you begin to play through first inversion, second inversion of those as well. So next thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to inversions is how you can, not only how you can form them, but how you can use them to actually style inside of your worship playing. And this is where learning your inversions gets to be really, really cool. And to get really good at using your inversions to help you style as you play worship piano, one thing that I would recommend that's going to sound a bit boring at first is, just like I talked about, practicing through all of your scales every time you play the piano. Practice through all of the chords within those scales every time you sit down to play the piano and practice. I would also recommend going through every single inversion of each chord in those scales. So what that would look like is, for example, just like we did with C major, play all the way through them, go to your next chord, play all the way through them, and do that for each and every note and every chord throughout that scale. Also wanted to take a moment to let you know that if you do not know all 12 of your key signatures yet, or all 12 of your major scales, I have created a free PDF download that is very detailed and very extensive. It's going to show you how to play every chord in every key signature, as well as it's also going to show you how to play every scale in every key signature. It also has, not only does it have finger diagrams, but it also lets you know the finger numbers that you use to form all those chords. So that would be a great place also for you to start. Jump down in the description and hit that link, and I'll send that guide right to you via email. And that way you can begin to take what we're learning today with these inversions and apply it to all 12 keys. So you're going to really, really enjoy it. So make sure to grab that free gift today. Also, jumping right back to this. So talking about styling. So I'm going to show you an example of how to style using inversions. And we're going to do a super, super simple chord progression for this. And I think you're really going to like it. So I'm just going to play C and F major back and forth. And we're just going to give them a 4 count. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make those changes with my left hand, doing octaves for this example. And then with my right hand, I'm going to style using inversions of a C major chord and using inversions of a G major chord. And I'm going to show you how, by playing different inversions of those chords from top to bottom on the piano, is a really, really cool styling trick that you can use with your inversions. And again, this works in every single key signature. We're doing it in the key of C as an example, but you can apply the exact same technique to every single key signature. So let's jump right into it. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to start off and I'm going to go from middle C. I'm going to jump up 1 octave and I'm going to play C major in root position. And so I'm going to go C major, G major in root position, and then I'm going to play G major in second inversion, and then back to C major in root position. So I'm really mainly utilizing the inversions on that G major chord. But again, we can kind of expand from this, so you'll see what I'm saying. So this is what it sounds like. So it sounds really nice. And as you get more comfortable with this, you can expand the same kind of movement over 2 octave ranges. So and it sounds really, really nice. And again, you can honestly play around a lot with this, because I was going from, root position, second inversion on the G major, back to root position. But you could really, on C, do the inversions on G, do the inversions on C again. And you really could mix it up as much as you wanted to. And this is a great way when you're in the middle of a chord progression and in a song, just to really, really, really style things up. So you can also, something else that I do a lot with this is I'll actually roll through those same inversions. So, and all I'm doing is just rolling those notes as I transition down through all those different inversions. And again, it sounds really, really good styling up a song. So let's go back to the chord progression we did before with the C, F, A minor, F. And I'm going to add a little bit of those inversion styling techniques in so you can kind of hear what they sound like. So. So you see there's a lot of options, and really all that I was doing that entire time was styling using the inversions of our C major chord and our G major chord, and I was doing it over top of the chord progression that we were doing with our left hand. And again, that's going to take some practice to get used to doing it the way that I was doing it. But again, that's why I say every time you sit down to practice, really practice through these inversions, because the better you get knowing them and the more used to it you get up and down the piano. And I would even recommend practicing it across more than 1 octave range, because this is going to really, really help you. And practicing it in a ascending order as well as a descending order is also going to help you to where you can really just create those feels up and down the piano. And so it's going to really, really help you in your worship playing. Inversions is a way to supercharge your worship playing, and it's also a way to really supercharge your growth in your worship playing. Now, it is going to take some work and it is going to take some practice. So it's not going to eliminate that from the factors, but it is going to really, really help you grow really, really fast. So that's why I want to encourage you guys to make sure you really dive in, really practice that in your practice time for your worship playing. So again, just to kind of recap what we talked about in this beginner breakdown series lesson, we talked about how to form our inversions. So the first thing we got to know how to do, of course, is find them. So we talked about how we have our root position, how we have our first inversion of chords, and we have a second inversion of chords. Then the second thing that we learned is how we can use inversions to keep our hands more centrally located as we make transitions through a chord progression, which just makes it easier to play. And it also opens up different voicing options for those chords. And then thirdly, we talked about how that we can then take these inversions and we can use them to style over top of our chord progression that we're playing. So I really hope you guys enjoyed this today. I know that this again is gonna like supercharge your worship playing and really, really help take you to the next level. So really look forward to hearing from you guys and how this really helps you grow. Drop me some comments below, and I'll see you guys again soon.